How to recover from your husband's pornography addiction. Today we're going to talk in this video about some of the basic principles and processes that go on when you've found out about your husband's pornography addiction. We're going to outline something called the trauma cycle, and then we're going to talk about some practical things, 3 practical things that you can start to do for yourself to begin the process of healing and overcoming the trauma that you're feeling. What's up, you guys? Tyler, your Wandering Therapist here. I'm excited to be here with you today. I often get a lot of questions about betrayal trauma. And most of the time I get, say, a wife that comes into my office and is just dying inside because she's just found out about her husband's pornography addiction. And for her, it feels so devastating. It feels like there's been this massive betrayal. There's questions that come up that she doesn't have answers for. She has doubts about herself. She has doubts about the relationship. She has doubts about God, about what the next direction is going to be. And so today, I'm hoping to help outline what some of the common processes are that go on for betrayed spouses, and what some of the basic principles are that you can begin to do today to help yourself in the process of beginning healing. So most partners, when they've been betrayed, experience a form of trauma. And that's normal and expected, because if you think about your relationship, the reason you got into your relationship with your husband in the first place is because you wanted a safe space, a safe person to be with. You wanted to be able to confide in them with everything in your life. That's what we look for with like a soulmate, right? And so when we choose a partner, we believe we're finding the safe space that's going to allow us to flourish and to grow into and overcome the challenges that face us in our day-to-day lives. When that foundation that we have in our relationship gets pulled out from underneath us, it causes a form of trauma. In some ways, and for some spouses that I work with, they actually experience symptoms of trauma the same way that someone who's experienced war or childhood abuse or physical abuse, they experience some of the same symptoms. And they end up riding what we call the trauma cycle. And I'm going to outline the trauma cycle for you today so you can understand it. If you're the person who's done the betraying, this is also important to understand, because you're going to be able to understand your partner and how to approach them and how to respond to them in a different way with more patience and understanding than maybe you're inclined to in trying to overcome this and heal your relationships. So the trauma cycle begins with this feeling of instability. And for a lot of partners, before they even know what's happening, they feel that something's happening. It's like their gut feeling is saying, we're hitting a block in our relationship, or something's not quite right, or I can't quite figure out how to get the connection that I'm looking for. And they start to question and wonder. And sometimes they end up in my office thinking it's their fault or there's a problem with them, and they want to try to make themselves better for the relationship, until it finally blows open. And then when it blows open, it kind of throws everything into question for them. All of the things come up, and who can I talk to about this? Because I want to protect my partner on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm devastated and I need a safe outlet. What else don't I know? There's all these questions about what other questions should I even be asking, and how far does the deception go, and how am I going to find out if I'm actually still safe in the relationship? It damages because of trust, and there's usually been a lack of honesty. And that lack of honesty is just as damaging as the actual acting out or the betrayal itself, because that honesty and truth in a relationship is the foundation that allows for safety. And safety is what allows us to be vulnerable, and vulnerability is what brings connection. And when that gets eroded or pulled out from underneath us, then trust is gone, the ability to be vulnerable gets pulled away, and now we're feeling like we're on an island. And then there's this emotional component that goes along with that lack of attachment that we're feeling, that puts us on a roller coaster. And many of the partners that I work with, they end up on this emotional roller coaster where they start to feel kind of crazy. They feel like they can't control their emotions. They feel scared sometimes, and they feel angry sometimes, but then they feel remorseful and guilty sometimes, and then they have self-doubt, and they sort of ride this roller coaster of emotion, and that gets exhausting. And if you're in that spot, you know what it's like to be exhausted all of the time emotionally, because the faucet emotionally is just on full draw, and you've got that emptying tank. And so what often happens for partners who've been betrayed is they look for ways to try to establish safety again. But the fear cycle is one of the common ways that they look for safety, and it doesn't actually produce safety. And so what they'll do is they'll have this massive emotional response, it leads to obsession. And obsession just is that looping thought process that churns and churns and goes through your mind about all of those questions. What else do I need to know? Or do I need to get a divorce? Or should I stay? Or who else should I talk to? I don't know what else I should do for myself. And that thought process just pulls your emotion out of you. It drains you. And as you get empty, it gets scarier. And so then spouses move into the second part of the cycle, which is called the control part of the cycle. And control will happen in a couple of different ways. One is that a lot of times a betrayed partner will want to fix it so bad that they'll try to control their partner by making them do all of the recovery stuff that they need to do. They'll be the one setting the appointment for the therapy. They'll be the one looking up the 12-step meetings. They'll be the one calling the church leader. They'll be the one going to their partner and checking their phone all the time or driving by their work to make sure they are where they say they are. And in theory, it makes sense because I'm trying to find a way to stay stable and I don't want to have to leave my relationship. But the problem with that is that I can never actually rebuild trust because now I'm the one doing all of the work that my partner should be doing for the recovery process. So I'll never be able to actually trust that it's authentic or true. The other thing that brings is it brings this feeling of being a probation officer or a mother, and a partner doesn't want to be stuck in a mothering role or in a monitoring role. They want to be partners. And so then there begins to be resentment, and that resentment then carries over into shame, and that shame moves back around into more of that fear cycle and that trauma cycle. And a lot of times if I've spent all my time trying to control my partner's behaviors, I get exasperated, I get worn out emotionally, and at the end of the day, ultimately, I really never actually had control over being able to fix all those behaviors. So that's the first way the control part happens, is trying to fix my partner and do all of their work for them. The second way that control sometimes happens, and this one is maybe the more internally damaging one, is that it goes inside. And a lot of like the wives that I work with who have experienced betrayal, they start to doubt themselves. They start to wonder, if I was just better, if I was nicer, if I had sex more, or if I lost weight, or if I dressed differently, or if I never showed any stress so my partner never feels any stress. And they start to go inward and try to control themselves in unhealthy ways. Sometimes that turns into eating problems or excessive cleaning. Sometimes it turns into just a whole bunch of like self-criticism that goes on inside. And that turns into shame. And then the shame leads to more of that fear, more of that anxiety, more of that disconnection. And so if I find myself looping in that fear cycle all of the time, then I'm putting a bunch of effort into something that's not going to yield a result. And then I don't have anything at the end of the day to actually put into what I do have control over. So today, you guys, we're going to talk about 3 things that you can do right now to get started. This is just a beginning because the recovery process takes time. Trust building takes time. We'll talk about trust building in other future videos. But I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do today for yourself to break the fear cycle and to help get yourself moving in the right direction and putting your energy into things that can actually yield a result. So the first thing that you can do is start educating yourself. Start looking at the right kinds of books, the right kinds of podcasts. Go get yourself signed up with a good therapist who specializes in betrayal trauma. Go find the resources that you can use to start educating yourself, because education, even though sometimes it's hard to do the education, to have the reality in your life, it will give you power to have a deeper understanding and to make choices. And there's a couple of places that I'd suggest you go. We also have a podcast called The Therapy Brothers, where you can go on and ask your questions. And there's been several questions about betrayal trauma on that podcast already. Look up The Therapy Brothers. You can also look at another podcast that my brother Brandon does called The Betrayed, the Addicted, the Expert. And another book that I'd recommend just for starters is a book by someone named Real Croshaw called What Can I Do About Me? And it's for partners who have been betrayed and how they can start to climb out of the hole there. And you can start with those things. See it as a process where you're going to continually educate yourself, and the more you know, the more power you're going to gain. The less it's going to hurt in the long run, because it's not going to feel so terrible and so out there, and you're also going to see that you're not the only one who struggles, and that this is actually a pretty common thing to deal with. The second thing that's extremely important right off the bat is to do whatever you need to do to create emotional and, if necessary, physical safety for yourself, and to do what we call self-care. And self-care is a pretty basic thing, but it's where you can actually imagine filling up your own emotional tank by doing for yourself a few things every day that helps you to feel recharged or rejuvenated. Whether that's a hot bath or a long walk in nature or a talk with a friend or doing some of your other hobbies, it's imperative that you do for yourself what nobody else can and will do for you. Because if the emotions come down to the point where you're emotionally drained, the emotional response actually gets bigger. The roller coaster gets bigger. And so if I'm doing self-care, what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing that I'm worth taking care of, number one. So I'm challenging all those negative beliefs that I'm struggling with about how I might not be good enough or if I was just better. That self-care challenges that. It also puts emotional energy into the tank, and heaven knows that you're burning a lot of emotional energy when you're trying to climb yourself out of the hole and when it feels so dark. So that self-care becomes important, even though most women that I work with don't want to do the self-care or they feel almost selfish when they're doing it. It's that shift in perspective that it's one of the ways you're going to have the energy to be able to do all the other things in your life that you need to do while you're trying to figure this out, like take care of the kids or go to your jobs or manage your other relationships. The third thing that's extremely important at the beginning is that you find support. You've got to start building a team. There's a tendency, because of the nature of these kinds of problems, to keep them inside. Sometimes we feel embarrassed. Sometimes you feel like you can't talk to other people because it's then going to hurt their perception of your husband or your partner. And so things stay bottled up. And when they get bottled up and there's no place for it to go, it makes it really difficult to cope with it. And so it becomes imperative that you start to build a team. Find people who are going through similar things. Support groups are a great place. 12-step meetings, other church groups are a great place. Even a therapy group is an excellent place to start finding people who are going to speak your language because they're going through similar things. People who understand the principles of recovery, so they're going to be able to reinforce those things in your life and help you to start adopt that healing and mentality and recovery. And people who are going to be able to show empathy to you as you struggle through these emotions that are valid. You know, you're devastated for a reason, and it's okay to have a landing space where you have people who are going to be able to provide that support for you. So those three things are the beginnings. I know it doesn't sound like a solution to the problem a lot of times, but remember that this is a process, and that these three things are things that you have control over, that you can do for yourself, that actually have the possibility of yielding a result rather than spending your energy in a place where you can't guarantee that you're going to get anything back. So best of luck to you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you found this to be valuable for you, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you're facing particular struggles that you need help with or roadblocks that you're running into, please submit a question. I'd be happy to answer it for you.